Something strange is developing right now, and I have genuinely never seen this in late May. Arctic air is crashing into the east coast while a foot of rain looms over the deep south. A tropical system may form in the Gulf by June 2nd before hurricane season even officially starts. A senior forecaster noted that models are printing record-high instability values for the Northwest tomorrow. Here's what is driving all of this, and once you see the big picture, everything clicks into place. The omega blocking pattern that baked the northern plains all week is now cracking apart at the edges. A strong Arctic air mass is pushing from northern Canada and driving all storm energy straight south. Think of it as a giant cold wedge shoving every storm system completely out of its path. That Arctic push closes the Mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley severe weather window by tomorrow morning. That same push squeezes all the moisture south right on top of already saturated deep south soil. We have three completely different weather stories running simultaneously across the same country tonight. Story 1, Arctic cold invading the East Coast for the first time since February in some areas. Story 2, a flooding train aimed at Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas through the first week of June. Story 3, tropical development brewing in the Gulf before hurricane season even officially begins. Meanwhile, an El Nino is rapidly developing in the equatorial Pacific already at weak status. The Climate Prediction Center expects it to strengthen into moderate then strong El Nino by late 2026. El Nino is enhancing the subtropical jet stream across the southern tier of the country this season. That means wetter conditions from Texas through the southeast, the Gulf Coast, and up the eastern seaboard. No two ways about it that El Nino signal is already reshaping this entire summer's weather playbook. Let's start with what is happening right now. The SPC updated the Day 1 outlook at midnight. There is still a slight risk active level 2 of 5 for the Mid-Atlantic and Central Appalachians. Norfolk, Richmond, Newport News, Hampton, and Portsmouth, Virginia are inside the slight risk zone tonight. That slight risk covers 12,541 square miles and puts 2.8 million people in the immediate threat area. The broader marginal zone wraps around at 138,692 square miles and 9.4 million additional people. Virginia Beach, Raleigh, Greensboro, Chesapeake, and Durham, North Carolina sit inside that marginal zone. Severe wind gusts and hail are possible from ongoing clusters through the next couple of hours tonight. ML Cape is running 1,000 to 1,500 joules per kilogram from eastern Kentucky eastward into southern Virginia. Steep low-level lapse rates keep a marginal severe threat alive into the early morning hours Thursday. Good Lord, this storm system has been cycling for over 24 straight hours and is not done yet. Tom, a retired teacher in Richmond, asked if tonight is safe. Keep your alerts on until at least midnight. Charlotte and Winston-Salem, North Carolina are on the southwestern edge of that marginal risk zone tonight. Lynchburg and Roanoke, Virginia sit in the zone where the cold front boundary is draped tonight. The Shenandoah Valley from Winchester through Staunton Gusty, rain-wrapped cells are still possible. Eastern North Carolina, including Greenville, Rocky Mount, and Kinston watch for brief heavy downpours tonight. The biggest overnight concern is not the wind, it is the flash flooding on already soaked ground. Dew points in the upper 60s to lower 70s combined with stalled moisture means every cell dumps hard. Now here's the big story for Thursday, May 28th. Everything changes, and it changes fast. Arctic air punches down the East Coast Thursday and slams the severe weather window completely shut. Storms get suppressed southward, action shifts entirely to the Pacific Northwest and the Columbia Basin. A slight risk level 2 has been issued for portions of the Columbia Basin for Thursday afternoon. Spokane, Yakima, Bend, Kennewick, and Richland, Washington are named in the Day 2 slight risk zone. Here is the number that stopped every meteorologist in their tracks forecast MLC APE at OTX Thursday. GFS and AM and RAP models are printing 1,500 to 2,000 joules per kilogram, potentially a historical record. Even at half those values, 750 to 1,000 joules, the environment still fully supports severe storms. Mid-level lapse rates near 9 degrees Celsius per kilometer plus moderate shear equals organized severe cells. Initial storm development fires over east central Oregon by 1 p.m. and moves north-northwestward through evening. Most model guidance shows upscale growth into a linear bow segment that means widespread damaging winds. Linda, a retired nurse in Spokane, asked if she should bring her patio furniture in Thursday. Yes, do it now. The timing of the mid-level shortwave trough emerging across Oregon is nearly perfectly timed with peak heating. Honestly, the CAM guidance unanimously shows a bow echo sweeping from Oregon into Washington by 5 p.m. The Tri-Cities area of Kennewick, Pasco, and Richland, Washington, you are in the absolute core of this threat. Walla Walla and the Palouse region of eastern Washington sit inside the slight risk for Thursday afternoon. Pendleton and the Dalles, Oregon, east of the Cascades is where the real severe threat is centered. Portland sits west of the Cascades, where the marine layer provides some stabilizing effect Thursday evening. The key timing window for Columbia Basin residents is 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. Thursday. Stay weather aware all afternoon. This fast-moving bow setup can drop trees and knock out power in under 10 minutes. Take it seriously. Boise, Caldwell, and Meridian, Idaho are named in the SPC population data for the Day 2 wind threat. Western Montana, Missoula, Helena, and the Bitterroot Valley heads up for isolated severe storms Thursday. Northern Idaho, around Coeur d'Alene and Sandpoint, also carries a marginal risk for Thursday afternoon. I need to stop right here because what I just pulled from the midnight model run changes this whole story. Drop your city in the comments. I will personally pull the radar data for your area tonight. Moving to Friday, May 29th, the severe threat shifts south and east and the plains wake back up. SPC Day 3 marginal risk covers western Montana, the central high plains, and the southern plains. Oklahoma City, Lubbock, Amarillo, Norman, and Midland, Texas are all named in the Day 3 population table. That marginal covers 269,146 square miles and 6.1 million people, plain and simple. That is a lot of ground. A southern stream jet streak around 40 knots overspreads the southern high plains Friday afternoon. That jet provides ample shear for storm organization along the dryline corridor from Midland to Lubbock. Large hail is the primary Friday threat, slow-moving supercells in a high instability, steep lapse rate setup. Between Midland and Lubbock specifically, greater storm coverage and severe potential may exist at the jet nose. Southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana also fall inside the Friday marginal for storms, hail, and wind. Moderate instability south of a frontal zone across that area may focus storm development Friday evening. Shreveport, Texarkana, and Little Rock, you're right on the northern edge of that Friday storm corridor. Colorado and southeast Wyoming carry a central high plains marginal threat Friday with gusty wind potential. Rick, a retired rancher near Lubbock Friday afternoon. Bring your livestock in early and get inside. The dryline setup from the Texas Panhandle southward is a classic springtime supercell environment. Instability values Friday afternoon could reach 3,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram across the Texas Panhandle. Storms that tap that level of energy can produce baseball-sized hail, protect vehicles and outdoor equipment. The timing for the Texas Panhandle is mid-afternoon. Amarillo should see initiation by 2 to 3 p.m. Friday. By Friday evening, any supercells could merge into a squall line, pushing into Oklahoma City by 8 p.m. Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and Fayetteville, Arkansas. Friday night severe threat is real and worth watching. Now here is where this forecast takes a genuinely surprising turn for the Gulf Coast this weekend. Both GFS and European models are flagging potential tropical development in the Gulf and Caribbean by June 2nd. If a named storm forms, it would be called Arthur, the first named storm of the 2026 Atlantic season. Hurricane season officially begins June 1st. Arthur could arrive less than 48 hours after the bell rings. GFS model data shows a low developing south of Cuba by June 2nd and tracking toward the Florida Panhandle. From Cuba, this system scrapes along the Gulf Coast, becoming a significant rainmaker for the southeast. The European model is more conservative on organization but agrees on one thing: massive Gulf moisture. Not gonna lie, even without a named storm, the moisture surge alone is a serious flooding threat. Sea surface temperatures near the Yucatan Peninsula and Western Gulf are running very warm this week. Wind shear is the wild card if shear stays low. Arthur could strengthen faster than models suggest. The Canadian model shows a separate low-pressure area developing near the South Carolina coastline. 3 different models, 3 slightly different solutions, 1 unanimous agreement: the Gulf is loaded. Donna, a retired schoolteacher in Savannah, asked if she should worry. The answer is yes. Start preparing. Here's what I am watching every 6 hours: the 850 millibar wind shear over the eastern Gulf. High shear tears tropical systems apart before they can organize low shear, lets them strengthen quickly. Shear sits borderline right now, and that 50-50 window is when things can go either direction fast. The GFS model is known for overdoing tropical intensity, but its track toward the Panhandle is credible. The European ensemble keeps this as a disorganized mass of moisture, but rainfall totals are still enormous. Either way, whether Arthur forms or not, the rainfall totals coming are the real story here. I kid you not, the models are printing 6 to 12 inches of rain for the southeast through June 7th. Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, and southern South Carolina are all inside that flooding risk zone. The GFS prints 8 or more inches from Trenton, Florida, down through Tampa Bay. That is a serious number. Southern Georgia picks up 2 to 4 inches in the same model run, and that goes out 10 to 15 days. All 3 major models, European, GFS, and Canadian, agree on the same zone even when amounts differ. When European, GFS, and Canadian all point at the same region, folks, that is a credible and serious signal. Southeast or Gulf Coast residents, drop your city in the comments and I will cover your flooding timeline tonight. Miami, Tampa, Orlando, and Jacksonville, the first full week of June is shaping up to be a massive soaker. Atlanta sits in the zone where repeated rounds of training storms could produce dangerous urban flooding. Birmingham and Tuscaloosa, Alabama have already seen flooding this spring, and this pattern adds more. Nashville and Memphis, Tennessee are on the northern fringe, heavy rain rounds possible through the weekend. New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Mobile, and Pensacola, you are all in the corridor of highest concern early June. The Mississippi and Pearl Rivers in Louisiana are already elevated from this week's repeated rain rounds. River flooding becomes the secondary concern as flash flooding clears and rivers keep rising downstream. Anyone near a bayou, creek, or river bottom in the Deep South needs a flooding action plan for early June. Turn around, don't drown is always the rule in this pattern. It is the rule every single hour of every day. 6 inches of moving water can knock a grown adult off their feet. Most flood deaths happen in vehicles. Columbia and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina are in the zone where Arthur's rain bands would hit hardest. Tallahassee and Panama City, Florida should expect the first heavy rain bands as early as June 2nd. The Big Bend region of Florida, Perry, Live Oak, and Valdosta, Georgia is often overlooked but very exposed. Dothan, Alabama, and Columbus, Georgia sit in the corridor where tropical moisture funnels northward. Memphis and Little Rock will feel this moisture surge. By June 4th and 5th, plan outdoor events accordingly. The Tennessee Valley from Huntsville through Chattanooga faces repeated heavy rain through the weekend. The Apalachicola River Basin in the Florida Panhandle is one of the fastest responding watersheds in the South. Pensacola and Fort Walton Beach have flood-prone neighborhoods from prior rain events still recovering. Savannah and Brunswick, Georgia face tidal flooding risk on top of rainfall flooding if Arthur tracks nearby. Charleston and Hilton Head, South Carolina storm surge flooding becomes possible if Arthur reaches the coast. The Ogeechee and Altamaha river basins in Georgia will rise quickly if rainfall totals exceed 4 inches. The Weather Prediction Center has a slight risk for excessive rainfall already active through Thursday tonight. Training storm setups like this are responsible for the deadliest flooding events in Southeast history. Now let's shift to the other half of this wild pattern because the cold side is just as remarkable. Arctic air from northern Canada is about to deliver the coldest early June temperatures in recent memory. The East Coast from Maine to Florida will run 20 to 25 degrees below normal to start the month of June. Berlin and Lincoln, New Hampshire could run 25 degrees below normal. That is extraordinary for late May. Boston looks at temperatures 20 to 25 degrees below average. This genuinely does not happen in early June. Climate Prediction Center's 6 to 10 day outlook shows high probability of below normal temps east of the plains. Even the 8 to 14 day outlook keeps below average temperatures locked into the Gulf Coast into mid-June. Meanwhile, the west stays warm and dry. Las Vegas, Phoenix, and Denver running well above normal all week. The northern plains and upper Midwest are baking with highs 25 to 35 degrees above normal this week. You better believe it, 90-degree heat in the Dakotas and near freezing New England on the same day. Buffalo and Rochester, New York could see highs only in the low 40s to mid-40s by June 2nd and 3rd. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Detroit bundle up, folks. We are talking coat weather to start June. Philadelphia and New York City could run 20 degrees below normal on June 2nd. Outdoor events need a backup plan. Washington, D.C. faces a dramatic temperature crash from Wednesday's humid 80s to Saturday's raw 50s. Chicago and Indianapolis are caught in the transition zone. Temperatures swing 30 degrees in under 48 hours. The pattern contrasts 90 degrees in Bismarck, 45 degrees in Boston on the same calendar day is head spinning. I need to come back to something I mentioned earlier because the snow forecast just got more specific. Northwestern Maine, Mount Washington, and the White Mountains could pick up a few actual inches this weekend. The European model is showing late May snowfall in the Northeast, and this is not a rounding error. Gary, a retired electrician in Portland, Maine, flat out get that snow brush out of the garage this weekend. Temperatures 25 degrees below normal for late May is precisely the reason snowflakes become possible at elevation. Mount Washington sits at 6,288 feet. Cold air funnels into the valley and snowfall becomes very real. This would be the first late May snowfall for lower elevations in that area in several years. Jackman, Maine, near the Quebec border, is the most likely spot for accumulating snow Saturday morning. The Rangeley Lakes region of western Maine also sits in the elevation band where snowflakes could stick. Vermont's Northeast Kingdom, Lyndonville, Newport, and the Canadian border region watch Saturday carefully. Even the Catskills and Adirondacks of New York could see a brief snow flurry Saturday at higher elevations. This cold air outbreak is deep enough and fast enough that it catches most warm season forecasts off guard. Honest to goodness, a Memorial Day weekend snowfall advisory is something I did not have on my bingo card. Before we get to the big summer picture, here is the number that should make every Southeast resident pause. The European model's 15-day rainfall total for parts of central Florida exceeds 14 inches in some grid points. 14 inches of rain in 15 days on top of already saturated soil is a generational flooding threat. Sandra, a retired farmer near Gainesville, Florida, asked me if she should sandbag her property. Yes, Sandra. Get your sandbags, know your evacuation route, and have 3 days of supplies ready before June 1st. Here's the bigger picture that ties every single one of these storylines together through the rest of 2026. El Nino sits at weak status today, but the Climate Prediction Center expects moderate status by this summer. Strong El Nino by late fall and winter 2026 is what every major forecast center is penciling in. This matters to you personally. El Nino reshapes everything from your winter snowfall to your summer drought. Under a strong El Nino, the Pacific storm track shifts southward into California and the Southwest this winter. Southern California, Arizona, and New Mexico trend wetter than normal. Genuine drought relief is on the table. The Great Lakes and New England trend drier than normal under a strong El Nino winter pattern. And here is the part of the El Nino story that nobody in the mainstream media is connecting the dots on. El Nino is building faster than models predicted just 3 months ago. That acceleration changes everything. The subtropical jet enhancement from El Nino is what is fueling the deep Gulf moisture surge happening now. Training storms keep forming over the same southeast locations day after day, and El Nino is why. And it is why the tropical development risk near Florida is elevated before hurricane season even opens. Mark my words, El Nino is the engine underneath every weather event we are covering in this video. El Nino also shifts the preferred track of Gulf tropical systems toward Florida and the East Coast. That means less Gulf Coast landfall risk for Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, but more Florida exposure. The Carolinas and Virginia are historically more exposed to tropical systems during El Nino seasons. For the Pacific Coast, El Nino brings a more active offshore season with storm potential near Hawaii. El Nino also affects global grain prices, drought, and wildfire risk. It touches more than just weather. The 2015 to 2016 El Nino was one of the strongest on record, and this one is already tracking similar. Dale, a retired electrician in Tucson, asked if his area finally gets relief from drought this winter. Yes, Dale. El Nino winters typically bring significantly above normal rainfall to Arizona and New Mexico. Mark your calendar. For hurricane season, El Nino suppresses the Atlantic with increased wind shear that tears storms apart. But homegrown systems in the Gulf and near Florida remain a real threat even during a quiet El Nino season. Gulf sea surface temperatures near the Yucatan Peninsula are running very warm, perfect for Gulf development. Florida, the Carolinas, and coastal Georgia must watch homegrown Gulf systems even in a quiet overall season. Hawaii faces elevated tropical system risk this season because of the warm East Pacific fueled by El Nino. The desert southwest monsoon could be enhanced by East Pacific tropical recurvature this coming fall. Oklahoma and Texas benefit from that monsoon moisture funneling northward from the Gulf in September. For severe weather fans, El Nino winters typically produce a quieter tornado season the following spring. But that prediction has been wrong before, so stay weather prepared regardless of any seasonal outlook. Good grief, starting the month of June with coats and space heaters is something nobody saw coming. You better believe it, the models have been consistent on this cold pattern for the past 5 days running. The bottom line, for early June, the south gets flooded, the east gets frozen, and the plains get severe weather. Let me give you a consolidated action plan because this pattern hits multiple regions at the same time. If you are in the mid-Atlantic tonight, alerts on avoid unnecessary travel until midnight Thursday. Columbia Basin residents on Thursday, the 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. window is your absolute high-risk window. If you are on the Southern Plains Friday, large hail threat is real. Cover vehicles before 2 p.m. Southeast residents through June 7th, this is a flooding pattern, not a standard storm pattern. Flooding kills more Americans every year than tornadoes, hurricanes, and lightning combined. The difference between safe and unsafe in a flooding event is a single decision turnaround. Don't drown. Have multiple ways to receive weather alerts. Phone, NOAA radio, and local TV are not redundant. They are essential. If a tornado warning is issued, get to the lowest floor and an interior room away from all windows. Never shelter under a highway overpass. Wind speeds actually increase in that channel, making it more dangerous. A battery-powered NOAA weather radio is the single best investment you can make for severe weather season. Sign up for your county's emergency alert system. It is free, and it delivers warnings directly to your phone. Know the difference between a watch and a warning before the next storm arrives, not during it. Make a family plan. Now decide on a meeting place, a shelter location, and an out-of-state contact. Leave your city below the most requested location gets dedicated coverage in tonight's full update. Check back tonight. The latest model data on Arthur just dropped, and it is shifting the track northward. No joke, this is one of the most split weather patterns across the continental U.S. in the past several years. I kid you not, every major forecast center is flagging this setup as historically significant for early June. Here is what you need to burn into your memory. This pattern does not resolve quickly, it lingers. The Atlantic hurricane season officially runs June 1st through November 30th. That is 183 days of watch. El Nino events historically reduce Atlantic named storms by 30 to 40% compared to La Nina years. The 2015 El Nino produced only 11 named Atlantic storms versus the average of 14 and 2 were major. Florida receives an average of 54 inches of rain per year. This June alone could add 10 to 14 inches. Arctic air on the East Coast, a foot of rain forecast for the South, a named storm forming before June 1st. 3 storylines, 3 different regions, all evolving simultaneously, and every one of them is still shifting. The latest model run just dropped and the tropical track is shifting. I will be back tonight.